So when I sat down to make my notes for this video, my guides told me two things right up front. They said it's really important to not have so much of a premium on things that come easy as being meant to be, that you don't grow into the person that can hold, ground, or stabilize the things that you actually want. And then they said, likewise, it's also important that you don't get so addicted to accomplishment that you can't live in and enjoy what you've already created and worked so hard for. And I said, that's an interesting message. And then took a deeper look at this sky, and I understood why they wanted to make sure I said that to you. We are at a collective inflection point. Um, we're in the turning of a tide. We are in the middle of a timeline shift. The train's left the station, the train is not at the destination. And as such, because we're in this place of the timelines changing, um, we have an extraordinary opportunity to make our lives into exactly what we want them to be. We're in the place where timelines are either chosen or not chosen, but nothing is happening to us in this chaos. All of it is happening as a direct result and reflection of choice, known or unknown. Maybe you don't realize you're making choices, and frequency, known and unknown. You may intend to be a positive person only to find that your circumstances and your mindset about them don't generate very positive places within you. What we experience or don't in the years to come is going to be a direct function of our consciousness, awareness, and choice in the energy of the back half of 2026. And in this regard, this this moment and the remainder of the moments of this year, they're going to be mirroring. The mirror being held up is going to be loud. It will be humbling. It will also be very inspiring. And in that, there's an opportunity to be encouraged about how much power we really have. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Kay Moon, and I'm a Western astrologer and twin flame channel. I'm about to break down this Aquarius full moon taking place on the 29th of July at 10:35 a.m. if you happen to be on the eastern seaboard of the United States. Wow, this is a sky like I've never seen before, and I'm sure you've heard so many astrologers talk about it because it corresponds to all of the hype that people astrologically are talking about with this configuration called Barbo's basket. And the basket itself, yeah, the way it's talked about is that it portends positive change for our lives. But let me say this, even good change can be uncomfortable and it can be challenging to face. And while this full moon, that's right here at the 6th degree of Aquarius, is ending a lot of problematic things in our lives as part of its 30-day activation pre Pisces full moon lunar eclipse. We're going to talk about that in a month's time. Sometimes change comes when we're not ready and when even when we want it or not interested in actively avoiding it, it can come anyway. And that's what this sky is showing. It's showing a lot of change happening all at once in all of our lives, and none of us being victims to it. And so, because again, this is an eclipse activation point, those of you who have been here, you've heard me talk about these. If you're new here, welcome. Please subscribe, stick around. I break these down every new and full moon. The eclipse that's coming in 30 days is the Pisces full moon lunar eclipse. So it's like triple ending. Full moon is an ending. We get those every month. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. So we're completing a cycle. Lunar eclipses paired with a full moon, as my teacher Nadia Shah says, it's an ending on steroids. That triple ending is closing out a massive cycle, and we can typically feel that at reverberation points before it happens, typically at the 30-day, the 60-day, and the 90-day mark right in front of it. And if you're, sort of a lunar cycle purist, we're really talking about 28 days and then 28 days before that, and then 28 days before that. So you can count that yourself. But, just for the purposes of what we're doing here, I shorthand it 30, 60, 90. Now, that said, these changes will feel a bit more intense than any of the other eclipses of this cycle, the Pisces Virgo eclipse cycle, as we're wrapping that up. And the reason why it's more intense is because of the aspects it's making. And I'm going to talk about the conjunction to Pluto here in a moment, what that's bringing, this sextile to Neptune and Aries, and what that's bringing. We have this trine from Uranus and Gemini, and we've got an opposition here with Jupiter in Leo. And yeah, you can see this sort of basket configuration, but I also will include Chiron at 0 degrees Taurus because I feel like as sort of like the base, like the bottom of this energy, eh, Chiron can't be ignored, and Chiron has a very special message for us concerning how we move through this in a way that is orienting, anchoring, and empowering. So I'm going to talk about all of that as we go. But we also see an opposition here. I use the asteroids. There's Haumea, or sorry, a square to Haumea. And then in addition to that, we see a trine to the shaman's asteroid, Makemake there in Libra. And then we have a semi-sextile from Pholus and Centaur in the sky right behind this full moon. So, so much happening, but this is why, and I'm going to break each of these down in a moment. This full moon may feel more intense than a standard full moon because it is. It is more intense, it's more urgent, it's more pushy, it's more demanding, it's more change, it's more insistent that we change and that our lives change to guarantee that we get to whatever is happening next. So, the one thing my guides were pretty insistent about saying, and this is, I feel like why it was just so aligned between myself and ASO Tarot that we produced the Collapse to Calling workshop that we're doing this weekend. There's nothing in this that's happening to you. You get ultimate choice here. And I cannot say that enough because I know for some of you it feels like, but I didn't choose to lose my job, K Moon. But I didn't choose for my pet to pass, K Moon. But I didn't choose for my housing circumstance to change on me, K Moon, but I didn't choose that person to break up with me, K Moon. Oftentimes, we don't recognize the alignment of third dimensional circumstances to a hope, goal, wish, or dream that we've held in our heart when it's actually happening. Because if we knew what it would take to get the thing that we actually wanted, frequently we would opt out. So, what's showing here is an alignment of circumstance to our own, the divinity of our own hearts showing itself in the third dimension. And yeah, you may not have realized, yeah, in order to, you know, let's just say your dream was to be a multimillionaire, you're going to have to give up the job you've got and get on a different path. It may have cost that to get there. In order to have a happy, fulfilling, healthy relationship, okay, a health crisis comes up, and that the function of that health crisis is to get you to deal with something that was underlying and unknowing to you, causing dysfunction and disruption in your mental health. And to get to the happy relationship, we had to deal with that underlying thing that was impacting your mental health. So the event and the chain of circumstances is presently underway for whatever it is you said you wanted. There's a biblical verse or like a Christian idea. If you're open to that, it says, "Count it all joy." A riff on that I can see in the sky is that it is important to have the faith that it is all working out for us. And so I say that knowing how many of you are in pain, how many of you are heartbroken, how many of you are confused, how many of you feel left or abandoned, how many of you feel frustrated and sad. I say that as I get into this energy because I want you to know that it is truly all happening for your benefit. And the more you can stand in that as your truth, the easier it's going to be to make the necessary choices so that this energy doesn't drag on and drag you down and instead becomes empowering. So let's talk about this full moon conjunct Pluto. Here's the full moon. There's Pluto at the fourth degree of Aquarius. Anytime Pluto and the moon are in conversations, emotions for many people tend to run quite high. And this is table stakes for feeling it all and feeling it deeply. In this sort of intensity, some people check out, others light up. They're built for deep waters. But how you manage it is going to be a function of your psycho-spiritual constitution and your own capacity. Knowing that not everyone has your capacity and not everyone has your constitution. Grace, 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 grace. Regardless of how you handle it, the point of the intensity is going to be the same. It's to get our attention. Something's changing, has to change, no negotiation about it. In particular, it's going to change through an ending or a completion. Pluto governs closures, endings, completions, and transitions of death. Now that end, like I said, that ending is going to come in Plutonian ways. So a Plutonian way an ending can come is in relationship to another person. Pick a person, it doesn't matter. You're recognizing that they're trying to take your power as their own and control, manipulate, or dictate to you all Plutonian themes. And you realize, oh no, this is not the way this needs to go down, especially if you've been a loop and this is a circumstance, whether with the same or different people, that's been on repeat. You put an end to the control, the manipulation, or the dictation. Not going to do that. Or you recognize that you're having to use your power to rescue others who keep opting out of or abdicating using theirs, either because they don't have the skills or they've opted out of developing the skills when the opportunity arose in the past. But you've come to a place in clarity in yourself where your life, because of this energy, demands so much self rescue that you can no longer utilize your power, extend your power to other people who are not utilizing their own. They are now coming into their own season of self rescue. Okay. Another Plutonian ending I'm seeing commonly unfold in this energy for people is that a toxic situation that occurred because of a physical encounter of an intimate nature uh, causes you to have to step back, leave it alone, to put certain protective measures in place. Take it as it resonates if that's your circumstance. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's probably not for you. For those of you who've been through something like that, you know exactly what I'm talking about and you know what you need to do. You're probably already in the middle of dealing with it. I've heard about several people who are dealing with court cases to manage circumstances of that nature. Another Plutonian type of ending that I'm hearing about in my client sessions is a fear, maybe your worst fear, has come up and it needs to get dealt with. And that's going to be different per person and situation, but the purpose will be to help you stop running from it and become more powerful by confronting it, even if you don't know how to yet. Just choosing to turn and face it is what's needed to poke a hole in the matrix and open a timeline where the support you need finds its way to you. Another type of Plutonian ending, because these are all things that Pluto governs. Pluto governs uh, physical intimacy, fear, control, manipulation, and what we call other people's money. This isn't the money you earn at your job. This is the money that you get from loans, credit, taxes, inheritances, lotteries, grants, etc. Joint finances. So a financial situation can come to a conclusion or a natural point of change. Like you realize you can't keep ignoring your taxes, or you paid off a mortgage, or the alimony, or the spousal support payments come to an end, or certain financial arrangements of a marriage or a divorce have ended, or the parent child or inheritance financial arrangements have come to a conclusion. But ultimately, this would be the end of an arrangement concerning income that's coming from you not directly putting your hand in the soil and being in the exchange. It's other people, what we call other people's money astrologically. Okay. So the joint finances, the investments, or the debt, whether you're providing it or you're receiving it, this moment marks a change in the status of established financial arrangements. And this change has been a long time coming. The writing has been on the wall that you needed to make a change. So this moment shouldn't be a surprise at all, even if it does come swiftly. The prompting to make this change came earlier this year. It actually began a few years ago to get on with rebalancing imbalanced power dynamics when it came to this type of money, whether you're abdicating your power to somebody else is holding power over you, You need to learn some skills to manage money in a new way. All of this is now becoming and coming into sharper focus for many with Pluto conjunct this full moon. Now, all of these endings of a Plutonian nature speak to an ending that this full moon marks as final and permanent. It's ultimately meant to be empowering in the way that it forces self-alignment and a release of codependency. But I want to be clear for many, if it is ending now and didn't end during one of the gentler transits, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026, this may feel like a particularly rude awakening. And it serves as a reminder to us all to make the hard choices early, not later. Okay. So that is the Plutonian component. But as you can see, let me clear this up. What makes this particularly relationship focused is that the full moon is in Aquarius. And Aquarius is all about our communities and our friendships and our colleague groups, our unions, our collectives. And then we also see Pluto's in Aquarius, and then Juno, the asteroid that represents partnership, governs contracts, negotiations from marriage to business. She is also in Aquarius. So this is 100% about a change in the power dynamics with people. This is a total relationship reset. And in this reset, this is specifically why my colleague and friend Asotero and I created this 4-hour live workshop called From Collapse to Calling. We're going to take a deep dive this Saturday into power, transformation, and rebirth. Because 2026 is asking nothing less of us, not just in our relationships, but in our businesses, careers, educations, family systems, housing circumstances, all of it. And with so many people experiencing so many surprises, this 4-hour workshop is meant to teach you how you can find and use in your own chart, your place of power. That's your Pluto placement and how to use it. Plutonian cycles, it is a Phoenix cycle, but it starts with an ending. And I want to walk you through how to greet that in a way that no longer feels like it's happening to you. We're also going to talk about understanding the energies of Tower and the Judgment and the Tarot, because they are inherent in Plutonian cycles. And then finally, we want to land you with a compass for your process, because this energy is very active right now in so many different ways. And it's going to get even more active in the back half of 2026, because the back half of 2026 is where everything is retrograde nearly all at the same time. September, specifically October, and November are going to be the most retrograde dense 90 days that we have seen in many years. And so I want to give you a compass for that in the wake of this eclipse energy that's coming, so that you're able to navigate it without running from it, drowning in it, or being caught off by it. And in the workshop, of course, you're going to be able to ask us questions. We're going to do some deep dives with folks. And then there's also workshop time with what we teach you. We will have some small groups at the end. That part is optional, where you do get to ask a question and get read by the group that's there. It is recorded. You do have lifetime access to everything except for the workshop time and the readings. But this is what ASO and I decided to put together for you, because we can tell that you're gonna need it. The challenge is, if you're hearing this, you need to enroll quickly. Enrollment closes this Friday night, August 31st, 11:59 p.m. As we roll into August on the 1st, we are going to get you this information just in time for the eclipses coming up in August and these retrograde heavy parts of the year. You do not need to be an astrologer or know astrology or tarot. We're going to teach you everything you need to know to work with this energy in this workshop. When you enroll, today's Tuesday as I'm recording this and getting it out to you. When you enroll, by this Tuesday, Aso and I have two gifts for you. I have a retrograde guide and workshop that I'm going to be doing in the month of August to help you prepare for what's coming in the back half of this year. And Aso has developed her question bank, her like, I would call it the perfect question bank, but she doesn't like to use the word perfect, which I respect, but her questions are truly perfect. I think it's going to help you as you're trying to figure out what to do and how to do it and when to do it, because the way she asks questions are empowering as opposed to about waiting for something outside of you to change. She'll help you understand how to work with your own cards, your own deck, or with readers you trust to figure out what you need to do to direct change. And that's really what this full moon is all about. So if you're curious about this, the link to join is going to be below this video. We'd love to have you. We're live on Saturday with lifetime access if you've got plans on Saturday, and we look forward to seeing you there. This conjunction here to Juno, who's retrograde, this is where our partnerships really come into the mix. Anyone you're in any format of collaborative arrangement and agreement with, business, work, family, anything, neighbors, community, that arrangement and agreement is now coming to change. There is major shifts in this energy concerning the power dynamics among groups of people because of Juno, Pluto conjunct this full moon, and all three of them receiving aspects from the remaining energies in this basket. When I explain them to you, you'll understand. But what this is saying is people who previously held all the power, we're about to see that story that they're the ones who are the powerful ones change. People who have previously not held any power, this is when you'll have found your back is so up against the wall, you have no choice but to fight your way out of the box, fight your way out of the corner, and take your power back. I've had many clients, ask me, K Moon, when is this going to change? When is XYZ going to shift? When is it going to be my turn? And a sky like this is very direct in telling us it's going to be your turn when you take your turn, not when somebody gives you a turn, when you take your turn. When you decide you can take up space, when you decide Pluto is power, you get to own your own power in your communities. That's the Aquarius part. And in your partnerships, that's the Juno part. Some of you in this energy, I've had many a conversation, are going to have to make a choice between letting someone you care about down and letting yourself down. Crappy choice A, crappier choice B, right? And I say that as clearly but kindly as I can, because ultimately, if you choose to let yourself down, it's actually a trick choice. Because if you choose somebody else and not letting them down, and instead, oh, I'll be the disappointed one, I'll be the one who doesn't get what they want, I'll be the one who takes the shorter end of the stick, this energy actually promises that you're actually going to also be letting them down later. The compromised, sacrificed, not whole, incapacitated, tired, burnt out, depressed version of yourself isn't the version of you they actually want or the version of you that they actually need, especially if we're talking about kids. So it's really important, as they say on the airplanes, you need to put your own oxygen mask on first in this energy and face whatever it is you need to face. When it comes to the story, meaning, and narrative you have about letting somebody else facilitate their own rescue, step up and grow into their own power without you doing it for them. Okay. So it's something to say there. And others of you are recognizing, oh, but K Moon, they don't have any power. I'm their guardian, or I'm their power of attorney, or I'm their. This is where we also are going to need to realize there are circumstances that we got ourselves into years ago that we actually weren't supposed to. And now that chicken has come home to roost. I know. I butted into business I wasn't supposed to be in, or I took it all on as a hero work, and now the hero needs help. I can't do it all by myself. I have to call in other people to support me. It's not going to work if it doesn't. I'm drowning. Okay. So the power dynamics have to change here. And I harp on that point specifically. There's just so many people in this community have such big hearts. You guys have done so much for other people. You go out of your way to be supportive, to family, to friends' kids, to friends' families, only to find yourself burnt out later. This is part of a massive ego restructuring. We're going to talk about this in a moment with Jupiter and Chiron speaking to this full moon around the way we have allowed ourselves to feel like, oh, it's a good thing to help other people. And yeah, it is. But sometimes when we're sourcing our validation that way, it actually becomes a compromising thing to their self empowerment and our own capacity to be available to ourselves when we really need to have our own back here. Okay. So we're going to talk about that momentarily, but I'm saying this because, yeah, this is a moment of significant self rescue while staying connected to other people. It isn't about disconnecting and rescuing yourself. This is about standing up for yourself and making room for yourself at the table that everyone else has already been eating from. Okay. So I like to see this in the sky. I think that's going to be very empowering for many people. And on the flip side, it's also going to be very humbling to places where we have felt entitled. This is where people who have permitted our entitlement will check us by just saying, drawing boundaries or clean lines or opting out because it's like, I don't want to, I can't use my energy with you that way anymore. I don't have bandwidth for it, this sort of thing. So it's going to be really rebalancing. And I like to see that for all of us in this new season of life on Earth. All of these endings, because Juno is in play, they are going to involve people. And because these are all in Aquarius. Um, and for some, it is super simple. This could be the end of isolation and being alone because we're built for co-regulation. We're built for connection. We're not built to lone wolf. And if you really believed that you weren't built for partnership, you weren't built for connection, or you're better off single, better off alone, I promise you, you wouldn't be listening to this. God wouldn't have brought you into my life. We would never have met, and you probably wouldn't have the internet, and you'd most likely live in a very remote place where the only creatures you see are animals, if that was truly who you were supposed to be in this lifetime. So I say that to say, we got to stay connected here, people, to the other people while we figure this out. And that's a good thing. Okay. We're going to need to work with others in new ways to facilitate our evolution in life. Now, this full moon includes a sextile to Neptune. So let's talk about this component. Neptune's over there in Aries. Aries is the sign of the self, sign of our own identity, and is an extension of that. The way people know us is through our behaviors, through our actions, through our ambitions. All of that is Aries governed. And then here, the full moon is emotions and needs over here in the sign of communities and friendships. I really love this part of the story because it's the dissolution of our old self as we knew it. So we can operate in new ways with people and in partnerships. And this allows us to see outside of ourselves and think outside of our learned identity, outside of our acclimated behaviors. And so I've been saying this a lot to the divine counterpart audience, but this certainly shows itself in this full moon as well. People can change overnight. Let them. Let them shift, let them change, let them become different people. It's actually going to serve you and them to be in connection while people evolve to witness becoming. Now, because of Neptune's aspects also to Pluto, as Pluto is speaking basically right on top of this full moon, we have a lot of spiritual growth here and an ability to see beyond our own ideas of should and into the realm of possibility and potential. This aspect can portend a collapsing of hope, but I want to say for sure this can be very empowering when hope falls away, in the way that it forces us to make decisions that we have placed on the shoulders of other people or the universe, while forgetting that we ourselves are one with all that is. We are the divine spark incarnate. For some people, yes, Neptune speaking to Pluto in this way, yeah, depression, it's here, especially with Chiron in the mix. Um, Depression may be something that you're experiencing here. So I want to just note that it's in the astrology and in the sky. But it's important to seek support if you know that this is something that you're struggling with. And again, some of this, the support may not necessarily be, it may be not just a therapist because so many things are changing. This may also be diet, exercise, changing your life circumstance, so that the circumstances that lend themselves to the depression can get resolved and thus give you a fighting chance at not experiencing that anymore. So it's important to get some support here. Okay. Ultimately, um, there's a complete breakdown of power structures, as I mentioned, as we know them with this aspect. And again, tons of potential here if we're not running around yelling, the sky is falling, the sky is falling, and instead seizing the malleability of our lives in this moment to direct our realities according to the divine will at work in us. There is divine spark in you. We're made of the same stardust that the divine made the stars of. Same way they're impacting your life, you get to be an impact. You get to be a force to be reckoned with. There's a subtext here for owning your own power. And I love to see that for us. So we also see this full moon, as I mentioned, in a square here to Chiron, who's just stepped into Taurus. This is a big, 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 big one. And I want to speak to not just Chiron square the full moon, but I want to speak to this in tandem because of the way Pluto and the moon are conjunct, and then Chiron is here in square to both. Moon is emotions, Chiron is that healing. Pluto is death and ending. But where Pluto and Chiron overlap is a type of death or ending that can feel like abandonment. And with that, and when Chiron and Pluto are in communication, we get an energy of grief. Grief is in the air at this full moon. There's no other way to say it or around it. And it's inviting us into a healing process concerning what's been lost. Now, grief is very obvious when we lose something that society can point to as a finite or distinct person, place, or thing, a pet, a home, a job. But many at this moment are moving through the loss of a dream because we either completed it or finishing it got interrupted by circumstances beyond our control, a sense of security. We've lost a sense of certainty, maybe a sense of identity. For some, that goes with reputation or status. For others, you've lost a sense of knowing the world is going to be the world that you thought it was going to be. The world as you thought it was going to become has ended. And you need to grieve that because now you're dealing with the world on very different terms. Okay. These kinds of losses can be harder to cope with because we don't have grief groups for the diffuse, the non-specific. We don't have grief groups for the potential we held in our heart for years, dying because AI is changing the industry that we work in and making it so that we have to think about our career in a completely new way or get a new career altogether. We don't have grief groups for the security you get from living in a certain country ending because that leadership changed, or the way you've been able to operate your business ending because the tools you use and the industry have changed, or the ambition you previously had has faded, or the love you had in a relationship disintegrated. We don't have grief groups for this kind of thing. So we overlook these quiet, diffuse, non-specific, non-local, dislocated forms of grief. We overlook these, but just as much as, the loss of a very specific person, place, or thing can just evoke grief, these other types of grief can also incite the anger, the frustration, and resentment, the bargaining, and trying to find a way to keep things as they are. Maybe I'll just work harder. Maybe if I just do more, maybe if I just show up more, I can get this thing to be what it once was. The grief can also be denial and numbness, just checking out completely, sleeping a lot, self-medicating in ways that use or abuse things that aren't good for your body, or using things that are good in very unhealthy ways to get through the pain of the loss. And depression and sadness can certainly be here. That feels like you can't put your finger on what you're depressed about or why you're sad, but it's there. And all of that needs to be faced as a way of getting to the acceptance place and coming to terms with what's truly over and done with for you. So I wanted to acknowledge that here for us as a collective, because in my client sessions, for those who are Star Club members, it's my community where people can read with me, but also share how the astrological energy is impacting them. Many are realizing that they've actually been grieving something for a year or more. They've been in anger for the last 4 to 6 months. They've been in denial for all of 2026. They've been bargaining and pretzeling themselves to keep something that really is dead and gone since last year alive, only to finally come to terms as we come into August and this eclipse season and this full moon, only to finally come to terms with what's changed and that they need to face and accept that now. Now, again, I go back to what I said in the very beginning of this message. Shout out to my guides for bringing that message through. But they said, look, everything that's changing and ending now, it's a function of exactly what it is you've all said you wanted to become. You just didn't know it was going to cost you this. So it's a little something to keep in heart as you allow these changes to let go and loosen the grip on who you used to be, the way others used to be, and how circumstances used to be, because that is over. And it doesn't mean it won't get resurrected. Pluto always includes a resurrection. And after Chiron's abject abandonment, he came into full acceptance by two adoptive parents. There's always something after the death, but you can't get there without going through the death first. So if this is you, first of all, know you're in great company. And between this Aquarius full moon and the Pisces full moon lunar eclipse, that this is an activation point for these changes are on schedule. They are aligned. They are meant to help us get on that higher timeline. It's just necessary that we allow the grief, that we have bandwidth to hold how life is moving forward. Stalled grief stalls life by lowering our capacity to be present with what's alive and what's moving now. Okay. And because Chiron is in Taurus and soon to be retrograded back into the sign before it, Aries, we're talking about grief that needs to move through the body at this point where it's repressed. It can then get expressed as sickness or illness. So the invitation, especially if there have been health challenges going on for you, is to explore where it's time to face that something is indeed gone. It is not coming back, not the way it was. And its departure is for our highest good, even if we can't feel that yet. Resurrection is on the way, but skipping the death does become toxic because we won't be fully present to allow what's coming be all that it's meant to be for us when we haven't let go of what was. You can't grab a fistful of the new if your fist is gripping full on tight to the old. We'll just be looking for the old to come back. And this is where it is truly time to let it go. So, wanted to make sure I spoke to that because I see a lot of diffuse grief moving through the collective for more than people who like can point to something specific. It's just shout out to my guides. I have a visual for you, which we'll do at the end of this, that will explain this and like kind of where we are collectively in a way that'll help your mind relax a little bit and do what you need to do in the third dimension to expedite and move this a little faster. So, but I wanted to make, they did say you really need to acknowledge grief with them with this particular aspect because the grief has been here, is going to continue to be here for a little while. There's time for them to work through it, but truly pretending like they're not grieving is not working. Okay. So here's that trine to Uranus there in Gemini. And here is Pluto and this full moon speaking of that trine Uranus, this aspect is the hallmark of the change in this setup. As this is the ruling planet of the full moon, Uranus governs Aquarius, and Uranus is changing in air signs, hearts, and minds, particularly in groups and communities, since both Gemini and Aquarius are group and community oriented signs. But in particular, this portends to the insight that will allow you to see things in a new way. This could be a giant aha or light bulb or watershed moment that hits you out of nowhere, or conversations with people or content that crosses your path, or concepts and constructs. It's like, oh, I didn't even realize that. That's coming, especially through new people. It's going to give you the chance to see things in a new way and take a whole new path forward in life. I was speaking with somebody just yesterday who was sharing, I've been on this one particular path in my work with people that has been very corporate. And I ran into this new idea. I ran into this new concept that somebody's putting forth in an industry around psychology and psychotherapy. And while it never occurred to me to work with people in that capacity, this new idea that this person is putting forth actually makes sense and actually makes it attractive. And now it's aligned. I want to go in that direction. This feels aligned for me. I was like, wow, that makes all the sense in the world. And, given what I've known about you, it actually seems like you're going to blossom and flourish and thrive on that path. But it was all because a new person came across their path presenting a new idea in an old industry and wanting to do work in a completely new way. So, twofold pieces of that story: don't discount or discard new information that comes your way. It could be exactly the key you've been looking for that unlocks your new timeline. And then, secondarily, if you're a person who is putting forth new constructs, new ideas in your industry, balls out, baby. Like, take it to the wall. Like, do what you got to do to get it out there. This is the time where people are looking for a new way to orient themselves to life on Earth. So I strongly encourage you to move forward with that. Do it. We need it at this time. We need new ideas. We need fresh perspectives. And Uranus and Pluto in air signs are bringing that forward for the collective. And we may all encounter that at this time in a way that becomes very empowering for our next chapter. Okay, so wanted to make sure that I spoke into that. And that confirms the earlier message from Pluto conjunct the full moon about major changes happening in our lives. This change has been a long time coming, and part of the manifestation for many of us, whether we intentionally manifested it or unintentionally manifested or not. This can also be this Uranian component here, a lot of emotional destabilization with these aspects hitting the moon. So if you know you're a sensitive person who has many emotional ups and downs anyway, this full moon can throw that into hyperdrive. Do what you need to do to self-care, nervous system regulate, don't overstimulate, but face what's coming. And for some who have difficulty feeling their emotions at all, this can cause you to feel things you may have been blocking and then feel it all at once. Like it can erupt out of nowhere and erupt quite suddenly. So, a word of caution: take it easy on things that you know can provoke you if you're sensitive, like movies and songs and certain people, or not managing your health well. And on the other hand, have grace with people who find themselves here. There's a lot moving emotionally and mentally and energetically for a lot of people right now. Okay. We also see an opposition from Jupiter in Leo. So there's Jupiter. Here's the moon conjunct Pluto. There they are. Now, this is a heightening of everything that's already unfolding. Whatever Jupiter touches, he amplifies and expands. And Jupiter is in communication with all of these planets. I've already spoken to and blowing up all of the elements that I've just spoken to by magnifying them, making them bigger than what they are. Jupiter speaking to Uranus puts us at the peak of a manifestation window. So thoughts are becoming things very rapidly. Behaviors are solidifying timelines very quickly. We also see um, Jupiter speaking to Chiron in square here. This is going to be part of what opens up that ego death that I had mentioned earlier in our broadcast. And then we also see Jupiter here speaking to Neptune, and that is opening up the potential, go either way, for addiction or spiritual enlightenment and expansion, escapism or deepening spiritual development. You know which camp you fall in. Use the energy accordingly. I've heard story after story in this energy of people shifting their identity and the ego that goes with an identity dying. Many have been talking to me privately about releasing the identity and label of twin flame or wife, husband, mom, or the identity of um, a reputation and status affiliated with doctor, lawyer, politician, um, partner in a business, partner in a firm, CEO, releasing the ambition for a career track that you no longer want to be on, even if you haven't fulfilled everything you thought you would do on it. And thus releasing that people have seen you in a very particular light. Those people are now going to go through a reckoning because you don't want what they want for you. You're going through a reckoning. You want a new thing, right? And so there's ego death in all of this and the releasing of identity, releasing the identity of being the political activist because your health demands you become your own health warrior, releasing the identity of being the savior and giver because your own life demands self rescue right now. This ego death is being caused by the death of sources of external validation in one way or the other. And Chiron really is sort of the linchpin of that. Also, Pluto, death and ending, and the sign of groups, conjunct the governor of partnerships. Both of these, Chiron and the sign of self worth and self esteem, speaking, all of them speaking to Jupiter and the sign of self sovereignty, self authority together. Whether we're putting all this together, whether we're stepping out of a place we used to get validation or that place is kicking us out, this aspect is meant to help us land in more self congruence, liking who we see in the mirror, releasing who we were that we've outgrown, and further being aligned with who's looking back at us in the mirror now, not who we used to be. And if you're still listening, I just want to thank you. Oh my gosh, this is probably the most important full moon of the year. Uh, I can't say that there was a full moon this important any time in my career as an astrologer that I have seen to date. Not one. This is the most important transit, time, aspect, full moon I've ever seen. And so I want to thank you not just for being here, liking, sharing, subscribing, but also just want to encourage you. Like, I'm taking my time with this to touch on all the myriad different ways this is playing out that I'm witnessing to give you that validation that you need. You're not alone, you're not crazy. Okay. Now, this full moon, lastly, here we're rounding it out. We're coming into the home stretch. with these asteroids, but the full moon in communication with the shaman's asteroid. Um, this trine is a bright spot, one of the bright spots in this heavy transformational energy. Because we have a grand air trine between Uranus, Make, and the full moon. This grand air trine aspect is where we get the blessings of our aligning ourselves with new people in new relationships. The blessing comes in the form of finally being able to integrate some of the more challenging lessons that we've been shown about connections and our own behaviors in connections, but are also our own mindsets. This is more about mindsets and changing of mindsets. And so the more we're able to integrate new perspectives, the easier dealing with people becomes at this time. And then getting support from people, supporting people, growing with people, sustaining connection. It all becomes so much easier here, interfacing with people, because of this trine and the new ideas it's bringing in. Blessings come, like I said, in the form of integrating those challenging lessons. The mindsets that kept us trapped in certain patterns with either the same people or different people, but the same pattern, hey, it's me, your ex-boyfriend, with a new face and then a new face after that, and then a new face after that. Can you just keep looping on the pattern? This is the transit where we finally get the revelation required to shift the pattern by changing our perspective and thus our behavior and the way we show up. This is huge because this is the moment where everything that matters to us, love, the marriage, what happens with the ex, what happens with the kids, what happens with the roommate, the friends, all of it can change with this full moon. I cannot overstate how big of a deal this is, how watershed and how breakthrough this energy can be. So get excited, especially if you've been stuck relationship wise. This is where you can really see some major changes. And then we have a square to Haumea. Here's Haumea, the creation goddess. She's finally done being retrograde as she squares this full moon. This is going to, because she's no longer retrograde, it will add back in the promise of resurrection with an ending that was withheld when Haumea was retrograde in the last several months. This resurrection energy does have the prerequisite of death, as we've been talking about, or an ending in order to get the resurrection. So I'll echo what I shared about grief here. It's part of letting the old thing die to make room for what's coming. And we also see a semi-sextile from Pholus and Capricorn, because hardly any lunation this year is complete without a communication from Pholus. This retrograde Pholus is going to make it easier for us to catch our toxicity and patterns when it comes up. It's going to be the pattern and the toxic pattern. It's going to be automatic and knee jerk to fall into. It'd be like breathing. But given how heavy handed this guy is and demanding that it is, that we do something completely different and completely new and let go of our old way of being, even if we catch ourselves mid act of doing the toxic thing and stop it, it's not too late. It's the perfect time to interrupt and end a pattern that's not working for you. So, in a moment, we're going to talk about elsewhere in the sky so you understand what else is happening and the signs who are going to feel this full moon most. And I'm going to give you my take on the upcoming Leo new moon during our first look segment so that we can see how this energy progresses from here to there. But first, a message from our sponsors, my guidance team. They drew me this picture. I want to show it to you. I'll put it here in the center of the wheel. They showed me this in a dream where they wanted me to understand that we are in the middle of walking through a timeline shift. And they said, look, Timeline shifts, they operate a little bit like toroidal fields. Energy goes out and around, kind of like this, comes back in. We've got this sort of donut energy. And then right here, like, he drew me this picture. They were like, you are here. And so they likened this moment is like walking through the eye of the needle. And so when you're threading a needle, it's a very thin structure through which you can put something that just barely fits through it. And so as you all are walking through this eye of the needle and getting ready to pop out over here in your new realities, you guys are walking through this. They said everything that was with you on this other side out here has to go. It's getting shed. Now, some of these things on this other side, they're going to pop out up here. They're going to pop out in a completely new configuration, completely different. It's going to look different, sound different, feel different, because your job while you're in here is to become different. You are the timeline. You are the one it emanates from in totality. So, a bit of an advanced message there. We're going to go deeper on that when we are in Star Club during our lunar circle. When we have our Aquarius Full Moon lunar circle, we're going to unpack that a little bit more. But they wanted me to make sure that I shared with you everything that you're shedding, not all is lost, but the dynamics and the configuration of all of the way it used to be, yeah, that's done. It can't go back the way it was. It's got to reconfigure in a completely new way. And the shedding right now is so that the old can fully collapse and you can take on the new. All right. So let's talk about elsewhere in the sky really briefly. It's very interesting the way everything is talking to everything in the sky, and whatever wasn't talking to the full moon, it's all talking to each other and having like an adjunct conversation. Not typical. Typically there's very, how do you put this? Um, Smaller conversations. Like Mercury will be having its own conversation with a couple of planets and asteroids, and Mars its own, and then Venus its own. Not so this time. This time, they're all talking to each other. So here is Mars, and Mars being the closest planet to the sun, there in Gemini at the 21st degree, is receiving influence from all these other planets and asteroids, which tells us that action, ambition, and behavior is receiving an activation for all of us at this full moon. So we have a conjunction to Ceres there in Gemini. There's a definitive call to close, acting and reacting in ways that might be superficial in nature, which is going to be good. We also see a square to Venus in Virgo, and this is going to open up a lot of passion. I see a lot of passionate people here. There's a way to really avoid this becoming blow ups and blowouts. And we'll talk about that in Star Club. We have a opposition to Lilith there in Sagittarius. That Lilith and Sagittarius kind of open it up a little bit of my way energy, but that's good because this full moon truly is like, it's one for the people pleasers, it's one for the doormats. This is really meant to help you come out of that pattern. Okay, so I like to see that. We see a trine to Chariklo and Aquarius here. This trine does showcase that there's blessings with new behaviors and closing out old behavioral patterns. We see a square to Nessus retrograde here in Pisces. A little obsessiveness can come online here. That can be a good thing. That can be a complicating thing. If you don't want things to be more complicated than they already were during the Mercury retrograde, we're going to talk about how in Star Club. We see a sextile to Saturn retrograde here in Aries. And then, of course, Pallas, Vesta, and Eris, all there in Aries. This is a very rigid sort of energy around making sure that you do put your own oxygen mask on first. And I think this is actually a good thing. But if you know you normally do that, I have some things to help you smooth out your relations during this period because I know you probably are recognizing people are melting down around you. So we're going to talk about how to not get too caught up in that while also not cutting off connection. And then we have a semi-sextile there to Mercury inside of Cancer. Now direct, hooray for the end of Mercury retrograde. We're going to talk about what lessons were meant to be integrated and integrating now. So I like to see that. Signs who are going to feel this full moon in Aquarius most. Aquarius, obviously, Leo, sure, Taurus and Scorpio, absolutely, but especially if you have Sun, Moon, or Rising in the first decan of this sign, we're also going to see Gemini and Libra really get a big activation from this particular full moon. Okay. Um, so much benevolence in the sky. I really love it. Let's take a look at the Leo new moon solar eclipse coming up here in just a moment. And finally, after all of that craziness of the month of July, we finally get a break. This Leo new moon solar eclipse is a very positive one. We see it takes place on August 12th at 1:47 p.m. And we see this new moon solar eclipse has some positive aspects to it. We get a nice trine there from Saturn and Pallas. It's a very protective energy. Looks like Eris is in the mix too, but I think that's also going to be supportive for people, again, who tend to hold back too much or do too much for others. We see this trine from Lilith. Again, this is going to be very supportive in getting people on their personally correct path. And then we see Chericlo here in opposition, which opens up the opportunity for blessing, but only if you are on your path as opposed to a compromised path with too many other cooks in the kitchen. I like to see it. I think this is really going to break a lot of people free, liberate a lot of hearts and minds. And I think this is going to be a great way to start a retrograde heavy season. If you're joining me for Collapse to Calling, just a gentle reminder, you do need to sign up before this Friday, August 31st. We are live on Saturday to teach this 4-hour workshop. I think you're really going to love it. Link to join is below this video. Aso Tarot and I would love to work with you on Saturday. All the frequently asked questions are here. Please take a look if you have any questions about that workshop. And do register as soon as you hear this video. If you happen to catch it on Tuesday, that's when our guides and the bonus workshop on the retrogrades from me and the question bank. I think it's called the perfect question bank, but that's implied. ASO's amazing. That expires tonight, and I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you for liking, watching, subscribing, and sharing. Thank you for joining us in Collapse to Calling. Thank you for sharing your stories in the comments and letting everyone else know that they aren't alone either. And thank you for just being with me on this journey here. It's been such a pleasure to be with all of you, and I look forward to seeing you at our upcoming solar eclipse. Take great care and bye for now.